Hi, welcome back to Peregrine. So a few videos back I talked about the famous house minion buildings in Paris, and I said I would come back and talk about the apartment search in Paris. So in this video I'll walk you through why the Paris market is so tough for tenants. I'll tell you which documents you need to find an apartment and some of the resources you can use. So if you're someone who's thinking of moving to Paris at some point, or you're just curious what it's like, all of this is for you. And before we get any further, don't forget to like and subscribe. So first, let's talk about why it's so tough to find a place in Paris. Why is the market so tight? So first of all, Paris is not that unusual from other major cities like New York or London. There's just a lot of demand, so it's not always easy to find like the perfect place and the perfect budget. It's just difficult in a city of this size. But something else we have in France are laws that protect tenants and even squatters quite well, so that owners or landlords are not able to just throw you out even if you stop paying rent for a while. This means that if you stop paying your rent, or if you break into a home and you squat there for at least 48 hours, the landlords have to jump through quite a few hoops. They have to take you to court. It may take months for them to get you out and basically start making money again from this place. So this creates a situation where landlords, real estate agencies, the insurance companies that insure those landlords, all of them are looking for a sure bet. And you can imagine if you're coming from abroad, you don't have a reliable history in France. If you're coming from abroad, you might as well be able to run away really quickly and then they cannot go after you either. And if you're just getting your first job in France, how do they know that you're going to continue to have that job? So basically, if you're new in the country or you're coming back after a long time abroad, all of these things make you less reliable, on paper at least, for landlords. So that makes it very difficult to find a place. So what are these documents that you need to show that you're a trustworthy tenant who can pay your bills? One of them is ID, so quite standard, just to show your identity. The next thing is show that you have a history of paying your rent. So they want to see proof of that for the past 3 months. You need a form showing that you have paid your rent on time for the past few months. The last part, and the big part really, is about employment. So they want to know that you're currently employed and that you make at least twice the rent. To show that you're employed, you need to show also proof of receiving your salary for the past few months. And they want to know that you're currently not in your trial period or your notice period. So that means that your job is then stable. So if you're not working, you can also show proof of being a student, but I don't know too much about that because I haven't been in that situation, but certainly being employed is going to be considered more solid. They also want to see your tax returns for the past 2 years so that they can see that you have a history of making consistent salary, and also it's kind of a way to check that you're in the French system as well. Something else that you may also need when applying for an apartment is a guarantor. So a guarantor is a person who basically can vouch for you and who can step in the case that you don't pay your rent. And it even means that if, let's say, you got into some kind of accident and you weren't able to get back into the apartment or empty it or pay rent for a while, the landlord would be legally allowed to turn to your guarantor and then say, hey, okay, the tenant is not able to pay at this point, but now you're the next in line who's still responsible for paying the rent. So this allows the landlords to have a bit more of a guarantee of what you're bringing to the table. And also, as a tenant, hopefully this is maybe a family member or someone you can rely on and someone that you could turn to if you did hit upon some hard times. So that's somebody who needs to show all the same paperwork than you, so ID, tax return. I don't think they need to show proof of paying their rent, but at least proof of employment is really important. And so usually the guarantor should make at least 3 times the rent. So you can imagine that if you come from abroad, either you're a full-blown foreigner or you're someone like me who lived abroad for a long time, you don't have any of this paperwork. I had tax returns, of course, but not from France. I had been making money, but not in France. And while I have family members, who make more money than me, they were also not in France. So all this paperwork, if it comes from abroad, it's usually not accepted. There are some companies who do specialize in people coming from abroad, and I'll talk about that later. But your sort of run-of-the-mill real estate agency, they really need to see French paperwork because French paperwork is more trustworthy. They can track it better. And if something went wrong, there's also less of a chance that you could, let's say, run out of the country and they can't track you at all anymore. So not having this paperwork in France can make things really difficult. So as much as possible, try to have that paperwork still, because it might be considered, but just know that not having this sort of French history is unfortunately a huge thing against you if you're doing an apartment search in the Paris area. In terms of guarantors, there are some solutions. There's this site called Visa. So I think it's actually government run, and so it allows you to have sort of this guarantor through this platform or this association, even though you don't have a human person behind you. So many landlords, many agencies that will also accept that as an alternative. So you would have to go to the website and upload your documents, and then they can tell if you're eligible or not. So there are some solutions if you really come here without any backup, any relatives, or anyone that you can turn to. Another way to get a guarantor is if you have a job before coming, or I guess if you find a job while living in Paris. For some people, your employer can act as a guarantor. So make sure that you check if that's possible, because that makes things a lot easier. So something else that might impact your search is some xenophobia, discrimination. So some of it can be justified, like if you don't speak French, there's a chance that you're from abroad, there's a chance that you don't have the paperwork and so on. But some people, like me, for instance, I write in perfect French, and yet just the fact that I have a really stereotypically West African name, sometimes I just wouldn't hear back. And I even did a test where I would sometimes use my middle name and my last name initial, and that sounds way more neutral. And I would hear back more often when I would be applying to the very same apartment. And then once I would get to meet people and, you know, talk about my situation, they see my work stability, then I would have a much better chance. So of course, if someone has really strong issues, it doesn't matter if you meet them, it will still be an issue. But sometimes you have to, you know, twist things a little bit just to get the FaceTime and get past it. So it's really unfortunate, but the market definitely can be like that. Even in my current apartment, I know that the real estate agency that I worked with, they called my employer to make sure I was really working there. And while that doesn't sound that unusual, the person who was working front desk there told me she had never seen that in all her years of work. So there was somehow something a little bit extra that they felt they really needed to go the extra mile and check my employment situation. So it was a little bit annoying, but you know, I don't know exactly what was the reason. And ultimately I did get the apartment, so I guess it's all good. So all that being said, thankfully there are still some platforms and ways that you can still find an apartment even without the paperwork. So my first tip would be stay away from all the real estate agency sites, because these are the places that are going to be the most concerned with you having the proper paperwork. So just skip them altogether. Even if they have really nice listings that you like, you'll anyways see them also on different aggregator sites, so I just wouldn't spend time on there directly. Something that you should look into though is Facebook groups, because again, not having the paperwork, what's going to work is personal relationships or personal networks. So Facebook groups, don't underestimate those at all. You can search apartment search in Paris or appartement à Paris, whatever, you know, buzzwords you can think of. Also look for groups from your country of origin or any languages that you speak. I think I'm in Swedes in Paris, Finns in Paris, Danes in Paris, Americans in Paris. I'm in everything, and that's a place where you'll see all sorts of posts, but there's a lot about apartments that are becoming available or people who are searching, so that's also a great resource. In terms of like websites that really specialize in apartment search, so I would say Logis or Logis is one of these sites that specializes in working with people from abroad. So they will still ask you for paperwork, but they actually don't mind that the paperwork is from abroad. They'll still take it seriously. So Logis is one of them. I think there are a few other sites you can look for. So typically, in my opinion, their postings tend to be a little bit more expensive for the size or for the amenities. But if you're really starting out, that may be your best bet. Something else you can use is just the sites that most French people use. One of them is Le Bon Coin. It's kind of like a Craigslist where you can find and post ads for anything, but one of the biggest sections they have is for apartments. So you can filter by, you know, the neighborhoods you're interested in, what your budget is, the size you're looking for, and then you see all the results and you can filter through. You can even see apartments that are listed by agencies or apartments that are listed by like private individuals as landlords. In terms of neighborhoods, that's a topic for a whole other video, to be honest. But my biggest advice is not necessarily stay within Paris proper, but stay on the metro lines, and that's going to make your life a lot easier. I know some people say stay in Paris intramuros, which means like inside the walls. There used to be walls around Paris back in the day, but yeah, just metro lines I think is good. Another site is PAP. It stands for particulier à particulier, which is basically your private tenant. There's a private landlord and they post their own stuff. So again, you don't have sort of the middleman of the real estate agency that does a lot of filtering. So not having the right paperwork may still be an issue, but I think that person-to-person contact makes a huge difference. I would also advise maybe the first month take an Airbnb that is at least guaranteed, you know, while you'll be staying. And it can even be that the owner, that Airbnb, can extend the lease for you. They may even offer that you stay on as a proper tenant. For instance, that's what I did. My move was a bit rushed. I knew I had a potential thing set up with a colleague, but it was going to be a month later. So I got an Airbnb the first month, and I actually got the offer from the landlord in that Airbnb to extend and pay month by month if I wanted to. So even those Airbnbs can turn into something more permanent. But I'm also glad that I came first, because it gave me time to go visit apartments, get familiar again with neighborhoods that I had forgotten about a little bit or they didn't even know that well. If you have a job set up, also ask them. Can they ask their current employees? Does anyone know of a place? That's actually how I found my first apartment. So before I came, I told my future employers, like, hey, I need help finding a place. And one of my future colleagues actually had an aunt who was renting out her studio apartment. So that's how I found my first place. My second place was a childhood friend whose mother had me in mind, and she had just bought a studio apartment, redone a few things, and she was looking for a tenant, so she reached out to me. So all of these things where I just let people know that I was looking, many people came to me and were saying, hey, are you still looking? Are you interested? So just making sure that you activate your network is going to be your biggest tip when you don't have the paperwork. And even people who have been in Paris their whole lives, the best deals they'll ever get is with someone that they know. And I guess that's really the same thing in many places, but that's definitely the case in Paris where the market is so tight. So don't hesitate to I mean, I wouldn't even say don't hesitate. I would say go for it. Absolutely be shameless and try to connect with people. And that is your best bet for finding a place. All right, so these are my tips for finding an apartment in Paris. And hopefully now you understand a bit better why the market is so tough. You know, tenants are protected so well, and it's really hard if you don't have all the paperwork, basically with this like French stamp on it, to be taken seriously. Don't feel the need to find a perfect place right away. It's going to be pretty tough. So for me, I would say it wasn't until 2 years in that I really had the paperwork that I needed to be on a higher plane, so to speak, with the kind of apartments I could apply for. And now I'm a lot happier with where I am. But the past few years, you know, it was really just Airbnb to start with, and then, you know, using my network. It wasn't my dream apartment that I ended up in, but it worked out pretty well. It served me well. So hopefully with this, you have a bit more of an idea where you can start, where you can look. And yeah, I'm sure that you have a much bigger network than you think, even in a city that maybe you've never been to. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to hear more from me, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Is there anything else you're wondering about the apartment search in Paris or anything else? I'd be happy to help. And like always, thanks for stopping by. See you next time.